Have you ever committed to something like a challenge playthrough or watching a YouTube video miniseries and realized near the end that you've made a huge mistake? Well, I certainly haven't. How about you, Fernand? Alm asks about doors and Mycen says this is a really big door, possibly the last door you'll ever open, so you better be ready. Yeah, I think I'm ready. Into Duma Temple we go. Heading down the stairs, we eventually run into Fernand. We agreed to avenge his death for some reason. Like Celica and Duma Tower, Alm also sneaks around to separate enemies apart. I use these encounters to get skill points on Alm's killer bow and to give experience to those who are closest to 99 experience. Moving on, Alm finds Celica trapped in a little pet carrier for dragons. More encounters to test out Alm's new ability. Alm progresses through the dungeon and Jeddah shows Celica his giant eyeball. At the experience fountain, I decide to have Alm drink a couple levels worth. After all, he's gonna have to do some stuff on his own soon. With that out of the way, I decide to go in a Berkutli direction this time. Berkut becomes fallen hero Berkut.exe and we have to fight him now. Python has hit the stat benchmarks required to defeat this Arcanist in a single round as long as he crits once. Cliff easily gets rid of the Mogul before it can spawn little Mogul babies. Rather than tackle the Fiends, I form a front line with my toughest units and Tatiana's illusions. The Illusory Pegasus Knights have just enough resistance to not die to the remaining Arcanists, which means it can lure both an Arcanist and a Fiend in one turn. One thing I need to get lucky on is which enemies teleport where, since so many units are exposed to attack. Luckily, that's a thing that happens. Now we do actually have to get rid of the Fiends though. There are 3 Fiends, and well, what do you know? We have 3 Seraphim users. That was easy. Before we can tackle Berkut and Renee out, we need to handle the rest of the frontline enemies first, or at least the ones that matter. After that, I decide to experiment a little and see what will happen to Grey if I put him nearish Renea. As expected, she uses her entrap spell to pull Grey close, and Berkut gets to take a crack at him. It would be funny if Grey beats Renea here, but he doesn't, so I let Cliff have a chance instead, and, well, he gets it. I try to throw Zeke and the Rider's Bane at Berkut, but that doesn't work, and he dies on enemy phase. So I reverse time and let Grey take a face full of Crimehild instead. On the next turn, Talthea, Cliff, and Python gang up to take Berkut down to 27 HP, and Zeke rides in to steal all the glory. And with that, the overly ambitious, insecure, and most importantly, incredibly abusive guy is redeemed by the story for some reason, and he gives us a keepsake ring, which I honestly forgot about. Back to random Battleland, at least for a while. I use magical teleportation tiles to grab the Gradivis for Zeke, take a moment to save at the Milla Shrine inside the Duma Temple because it's there for some reason, so I may as well use it, and then use teleportation to move in a generally forwardly direction through both the temple and the story. Alm reaches the treasure vault, which of course he needs to go alone. So, fight number 1. Alm equips the killer bow and goes 1 tile south of where the supplies tile currently is and parks there. He shoots at a thing and lets the rest come at him. While there is a chance of dying, I'd rather have Alm be on the tile where the supplies will be once the map changes rather than where the supplies actually start. At this point, it's just a waiting game, so like any normal person in this situation, he eats a jar of honey, draws his royal sword, and continues to fight until everyone but him is dead. Fight number 2. Alm equips the killer bow, stands on a supply tile, and shoots a gargoyle dead. Then they all come at him on enemy phase, and he fails to crit 3 of them. This is fine since it prevents him from dying on enemy phase this turn. I decide to play it safe and take good care of Alm by feeding him a stick of butter.
That was delicious.
Enemy phase goes fairly well, but there isn't a 100% safe way to finish this on the 3rd player phase, so Alm eats some bread. I guess you could say his diet is pretty bread and butter. Anyway, the gargoyles all die. Fight number 3. Alm equips the royal sword, stands on a supply tile, and lets the dragons come to him. When it feels like Alm's probably not going to get surrounded by dragons, he switches to the killer bow and starts dealing some real damage. Alm gets the Arcanist really close to dying, and on enemy phase, he remembers what almost dying feels like. Alm retreats to nervously devour a block of cheese, slays yet another dragon, and murders yet another Arcanist. Battle complete. At the end of the trials, Alm sees an NFT of Falchion. He tries to explain to Celica that she's being scammed, but she doesn't listen because she tunes into Jeddah's crypto podcasts twice a week, so Alm does the only reasonable thing. But he immediately regrets it and starts to cry. Alm's tears seem to revive Celica. Anyway, Milla gives us one final mission. Kill her bro. And so we head into the final battle. At this point, you probably have a decent idea of who's coming along for this rodeo. I can't afford to bring anyone but the best units, so no memeing. I guess Atlas isn't gonna learn rescue in this run either. I decided to open with Celica's team working on clearing out the moguls closest to their starting position because, well, what else are they gonna do? Meanwhile, Alm's group works on securing the area around them, with a couple of exceptions. Silk uses Invoke to summon Illusory Dread Fighters, which are very important to my strategy. and Faye uses Rescue to pull Alm closer to the right so that he can start making his way to Duma ASAP. But Gray dies to a teleporting Dreadfighter, so I reduce some moves. On enemy phase, Marla teleports from the right side to the left side to start cranking out witches. It's pretty consistent for enemies that make more enemies to pick empty places to reinforce, and this particular move is actually something I want. I can't allow Jeddah and his wall of moguls to grow, so on turn 2 I start breaking that down. Killing the super dangerous named enemies on the left is also kind of important. After using Tatiana to heal up Silk's Dreadfighter illusions, I use Faye to pull her towards the right group so that she can fortify there later. On enemy phase, the illusions and Conrad serve as really good bait, and Hestia teleports to help Marla make more witches, which is absolutely perfect because Silk's Dreadfighters one round the generic witches perfectly on ally phase. So the more Dreadfighters Silk can crank out, the faster it will be to deal with the named witches. Turn 3 is all about coming to terms with the fact that Duma is going to use Earthquake. So I take care of some immediate threats like Pokemon Heart Aurum and Soul Argentum. I delete as many moguls as possible, and I don't have a lot of problems to deal with on enemy phase. Unfortunately though, the Dreadfighter illusions are too injured to do any real work. Turn 4 is a turn of clearing moguls and pulling Gray back so he doesn't die. Saber dodge tanks Duma, and Dreadfighter illusions help cut a path toward Hestia. On turn 5, I look up my 4x tables and burn some attack nullifications before trying to kill Jeddah with a couple of Killer Bill crits from Alm. It doesn't quite work, but I get pretty close. Zeke rides off to murder Hestia, and I try to have Gray kill Marla, but he fails, so Zeke has to do it on enemy phase. Left side is finally clear, and Duma makes some more mogul friends. Turn 6 features more fake attacks on Jeddah before setting him on fire. As he should be. There's also some mogul deletion, and Silk helps with evacuating the empty left side of the map. On turn 7, Delthea roasts Garn, ensuring his silly Medusa spell won't interfere with our goal of defeating Duma. Now I start to make my approach towards him, careful not to leave any units in his range that he can one-shot, at least eventually. The absolute last thing I need is for Duma to teleport, although I admit I kinda wanted to see it, so every unit that can survive a counterattack moves in to chip him down. Alm doesn't have Send Scale on the Falchion yet, which makes this a teensy bit awkward. A Ragnarok from Delthea finally gets Duma below question mark HP range, which is also the point where Duma can only be harmed by Falchion, and Nosferatu, I guess. With that in mind, Alm starts to whittle Duma down further so I can move Celica in for that sweet critical hit bonus. And then, it's time for Alm to swing the final blow.
This is how it's done!
And that, as they say, is that. If you stuck with me this long, you're awesome. Your reward is that you get to hear some of my closing thoughts on this run. As far as challenge playthroughs go, this one was a test of patience and planning. The limit of 3 teleporting enemies per turn, combined with abundant Miller's turmoil uses, meant that completing the game is pretty much an inevitability, assuming you have the time to pull it off. Also, this game has grinding, and I could have made it a lot easier on myself if I wanted to. That's not to say skill wasn't a factor at all, though. The playthrough took a lot of effort on my part when it came to the pre-planning that needed to be done around making sure my units hit certain levels and stat benchmarks when I needed them to, knowing what to forge, and knowing what combat arts and spells were needed, and when. That being said, the fact that you can get away with very suboptimal choices, I think proved to me that teleportation isn't as bad as I thought going into this. Of course, there's also needing to know how teleportation AI works in the first place, and how it targets units on the edges of clumps, as well as isolated units, and how it works somewhat randomly. I did clear the game on Hard Classic under 500 turns with no permanent casualties, so I feel like that counts for something too. One last thing I'll say is that this run helped me with understanding is that Shadows of Valentia's map design is not actually that bad. I never had an extremely negative opinion of the game's maps, but never a super positive one either. The maps are bland, I won't argue against that. The map repetition is a dated relic of games trying to save storage space, but the maps are designed well for the way the game is intended to be played. The maps absolutely break down when everyone has a chance to teleport, not that that's terribly surprising, but the extent to which the map design in this game so heavily relies on both player and enemy positioning is interesting, to say the least. It would be interesting to revisit this in an Iron Man context or something like that, but I think I've had my fill of this game for now. Although maybe I'll try the post-game on a stream or something. I have more ideas on future challenge playthroughs, but as you can imagine, these are massive undertakings that I do with what limited amount of time I have, so tell me what you think I should do next and we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for watching and have a good one.